I do know that the Center for Disease Control, they are doing relatively consistent monitoring of rural drinking water and sanitation status. And right now, I think raising awareness about rural water quality and also building better sanitation, building new toilet infrastructure, that's something that they're pushing heavily in a lot of the communities. But again, it depends on the region. Some areas you could see, for example, in like Ningxia that we visited, right? That area, like you would actually see that the infrastructure is there. Things are improving, and people have actually come in to test for water quality, and that's probably like a priority region for the local government to really get these issues solved. But then for some other regions, you wouldn't see it as much of a priority, and water infrastructure isn't there. And when you ask the local community member, has anyone really come in to test for their water, they would say no one has ever come in. And also, even for water monitoring, most of the monitoring of groundwater is public wells. They rarely go into each individual households to test their own wells, especially these shallow groundwater wells, which are the wells that are more likely to have problems. So in those cases, even though you know generally what this issue is like, you might not really know each of the household issues. So the monitoring has gaps that's at the individual level. They don't really have data at the individual level. And as for prevention, I think we all know prevention at point sources is easier. Point sources of like industries and factories nearby. That's not in the sense that it's monitored well, but it's easier compared to monitoring non-point sources. So we'll talk about these separately. For point sources, right? In rural communities, again, it's very hard to monitor, especially for a lot of these small industries. You want to monitor them, but a lot of their livelihood actually depends on their capacity to pollute, right? Because as long as one small factory pollutes, they would lower their costs by a lot because they don't have to treat their water. So they lower their costs by a lot, they lower their prices by a lot, and all the other factories have to compete with this factory. So all of them would pollute. And that's basically what happens in a lot of rural communities, not just in China, and in India as well, is with these small and medium scale factories, enterprises. A lot of them survive by polluting. And so that's why there has been recent regulation to shut down all paper mills below a certain size. In Henan, in a lot of regions, that has happened because they just can't find any other way to deal with it. It's just insanely hard to monitor, and these industries just very negatively compete with each other through polluting the environment. And also, when they pollute the environment, they pollute it secretly at night. Right? So you can't really go there and monitor them. When you go there, they don't. Everything's fine. And then they pollute at night, and then they wait for it to dilute, and then everything seems fine again at daytime. So those things happen. And so one of the things that the government started doing is to just shut them down, right? So that's something that's been in place for point sources. I'm sure down the road, better implementations of law would be in place. And there are actually a lot of other nonprofits that are monitoring specifically industrial pollution, and they actually put sensors near like where the polluting pipes are placed, so it would continuously monitor. So even if they pollute at night, they would see that. So there's actually a lot of other nonprofits that are working specifically on industrial pollution prevention, and they're helping the government to monitor these types of pollution, and they're doing pretty well. And for non-point sources, it's even like a harder business, right? Because how do you monitor it if it's just like runoff from agricultural land? And agricultural wastewater is just like going into the rivers and stuff. And especially for most rural communities that we visited, a lot of them rarely have places where like a central waste dumping place or a central sewage system. Most of these places, they just pour their wastewater down down into the river or throw their trash nearby the river because they still don't really have these centralized systems. So it's kind of inevitable that it would contaminate river water, it would contaminate groundwater. And it's but recently, again, more and more villages that we visit, we see more centralized system. We see potentially locations with new pipelines built in, and we see a lot of new technologies developed, like gardens that are helping to filter water before they run off into rivers, right? So basically, these are purifying gardens that they try to put in place. There are new technologies are coming in, new systems are coming in, and they're trying to centralize the process of treating wastewater, at least household wastewater and household waste. So I think it's on the rise. It's a positive trend, but again, there's a lot more work to do, especially with non-point sources pollution, which is a pretty wide-scale issue, and I think that would take a long time to solve because it's even impossible to monitor. Yeah.